Now, once Deadpool pretty much starts his quest looking for Wolverine, and quickly finds him, that's when the movie really kicked into gear for me. Simply because Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman have fantastic chemistry with each other throughout this entire movie. It just immediately comes across in their performances, both comedically and dramatically. This is very much a buddy road trip movie where you have two people who are seemingly very different from each other having to work together despite the fact that they don't like each other very much, or at least one of them does not like the other very much. It's planes, trains, and automobiles. It's 48 Hours. It's a lot of those classic 80s buddy cop or buddy road trip movies. It has that vibe to it. So I'm finally back from my relaxing, but also very productive sabbatical. I was able to figure out a lot of things, moving forward into the future now. But I also just want to thank you guys for, all the support in the meantime. And I hope you guys just had a great weekend overall and also feeling very fresh. Now, during my time off, I was able to finally check out Deadpool and Wolverine, a movie that was one of my most anticipated for this year, for 2024. Not only because it's a big blockbuster comic book movie, and has the potential to be possibly one of the biggest movies of the year, if not the biggest film of 2024, but also because it's the third entry in the Deadpool series. But on top of that, we're also finally getting that long-awaited team-up between Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool and Hugh Jackman's Wolverine. And yes, I know they were technically teamed up with each other for X-Men Origins Wolverine, but are we really going to count that movie at this point? Are we going to count it? The less said about that film, the better, in my opinion. This is the proper team-up movie. This is the proper team-up between these two titans of the comic book medium. Along with the film itself being a heartfelt goodbye of sorts for the 20th Century Fox era of Marvel films, both the good and certainly the bad. Now, the Deadpool franchise itself was a great shot in the arm to the superhero genre, especially the first Deadpool film back in 2016. Again, for the people that don't know, that movie that almost just didn't happen. But thanks to the powers that be and Ryan Reynolds and his friends leaking test footage, we got that movie. And, later on, the 2018 sequel. And along with just, being a great depiction of Deadpool in general, they also just served as nice critiques of the superhero subgenre itself, making fun of its stories, its characters, and tropes. I believe genres need this at times, to stay healthy and address issues that might be plaguing them at certain times. And Deadpool Wolverine, again, along with being a fond farewell to the Fox era and finally giving us that Deadpool and Wolverine team-up movie, it's been pushed and marketed as a critique on the superhero subgenre, like its predecessors, but also Marvel itself, I would say, who has been, I would argue, trying to recapture the fervor of the post-Endgame days, Avengers Endgame. And not to say that they haven't made some really entertaining, movies over the last several years. They absolutely have. There's quite a few. Movies like Spider-Man No Way Home, or more recently last summer, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which I really enjoyed too. But, they received a lot of criticism, some fair criticism as of late, being somewhat rudderless and just kind of like a number of projects, floundering, not meeting people's expectations, even my own expectations. But, with all that being said, I've finally seen Deadpool and Wolverine, a blockbuster that has a good shot at being one of the most commercially successful superhero films of all time. So how was it? Now, while I don't think it reaches the same heights as the first Deadpool from 2016, Deadpool and Wolverine is a very fun movie, thanks to the absolutely fantastic chemistry between Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman. Also, a number of surprisingly endearing supporting performances from the cast. and also some great action sequences. While it's also funny, not every joke landed for me in this movie, and there is some exposition at times that felt a bit awkward and ham-fisted, both because director Sean Levy opts to tell and not show in regard to some character motivations, and also just some timey-wimey mumbo-jumbo to explain the multiverse, which kind of feels all over the place at sometimes. Now, from the get-go, the film leads hard into the fact that Deadpool, the X-Men, their supporting characters, mutants in general, are now owned by Disney and Marvel proper, with Ryan Reynolds constantly cracking jokes about that fact. Like in the previous films, we get an excellent musical intro that I'm sure many people will probably be obsessing over for quite some time for the foreseeable future. But we also just get a nice look into the life of Wade Wilson post Deadpool 2. He's somewhat listless and frustrated by his life. He's dealing with a certain rejection to a particular superhero team or teams actually. And eventually he's whisked away by the TVA, the Time Variance Authority, first introduced in season 1 of Loki. And all this leads to him having to find, Wolverine, so they can save his friends, his family, and of course, the world. Now, once Deadpool pretty much starts his quest looking for Wolverine, and quickly finds him, that's when the movie really kicked into gear for me, simply because Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman have fantastic chemistry with each other throughout this entire movie. It just immediately comes across in their performances, both comedically and dramatically. This is very much a buddy road trip movie where you have two people who are seemingly very different from each other having to work together despite the fact that they don't like each other very much, or at least one of them does not like the other very much. It's planes, trains, and automobiles. It's 48 Hours. It's a lot of those classic 80s buddy cop or buddy road trip movies. It has that vibe to it, and I think it mostly succeeds. It does a great job in capturing that vibe and that energy. It's like, yes, you get plenty of scenes where Deadpool and Wolverine are fighting one another, two big bloody scenes, in fact, and a ton of scenes where they're slicing, dicing, disemboweling countless other characters along the way. All of these scenes are fun. They're really well choreographed, and they are very brutal. But some of my favorite moments between the two were when they were just talking to each other in a post-apocalyptic diner, enjoying a nice meal of rotten spam, or driving in a rundown car, and Deadpool quickly annoying Wolverine. Seeing Jackman's Wolverine just growing increasingly exasperated with Reynolds' Deadpool, it just feels straight out of the comic. And pretty much worked every time for me. Every time that they had a goofy little interaction, it was really amusing, it was really funny, and it was also really endearing. Now, you do have a number of supporting characters who assist Deadpool and Wolverine throughout their adventure, throughout the film, and they get some great comedic and even emotional moments too. Now, I'd love to say who they are and what they do, but they are in themselves major spoilers. They go beyond just being cameos or tertiary characters or background characters or one-off gag characters. They're relevant to the story itself, and they have great interactions both with Deadpool and Wolverine, and with each other. Now, yes, you do get some fun cameos, of course, and the appearance of various characters from prior films, both MCU and Fox. And what they end up doing with most of them work to a great degree throughout the entire movie. One of the film's big bads is Cassandra Nova, played by Emma Corrin. She's like the twin sister of Charles Xavier from the comics. She resides in the Void, along with other rejects and characters from the MCU and the X-Men Fox universe. The post-apocalyptic realm of trash that's pretty much controlled by the TVA, where we saw, Loki and Sylvie and all those, and Mobius and those characters in season 1. That's where they reside in. Other than what she does with her psychic powers, which is pretty gross and terrifying. She's threatening. She's a serviceable villain. She's a serviceable villain at best, serving as just the big bad that Deadpool and Wolverine need to handle in between their own conflicts, which is more interesting. Not a bad performance from her, not at all. I'm relatively unfamiliar with her as an actress. I'm sure I've seen her in other things. I'm sure she's been great. And what she's given here, she's okay. How Cassandra Nova is being portrayed in this particular movie, how she's being adapted. Just an unremarkable character in terms of depth. The same goes for Matthew McFadden's character, Paradox, an agent, a member of the TVA who has delusions of grandeur, in my opinion. While his performance, it isn't bad, he gets a lot of exposition, which isn't that interesting. And I'll get into the exposition of it all in just a bit. As I said earlier, the film's humor didn't always land for me. There were some jokes either went over my head or there was a particular reference I was unfamiliar with. However, there were plenty of other times where the humor did work for me. And a recurring gag, sight gag, or joke got me really good. The movie to me is funnier than Deadpool 2. Which I found pretty inconsistent, but not as funny as Deadpool 1. But again, as I often say, comedy is incredibly subjective. What I may find funny, you may not, and of course, vice versa. My last negative of the movie would be the moments of exposition and the showing and not telling in regard to Wolverine's past. Just like, how many times do you have to see the tragedy of Wolverine's past? Where it's like, I think that's fair. Now, while the film even makes fun of the exposition itself as it's being delivered with Deadpool's, commentary, and a MacGuffin, funny enough, that later is introduced in the film, it's still dealing with a lot of the telling and not showing at times, which is weird since I feel like they had the means to better show certain things, especially when it came to Jackman's Wolverine and the tragic past that's relevant to their story. It has nothing to do with the Weapon X program, which I know we've seen countless times over and over and over again throughout the other X movies. It's something else. It's something in particular that I wish that they had showed. I think it would have helped. I mean, Jackman again is giving a great performance. He's selling these emotional moments. I mean, he's not in a good place in this movie. I mean, it's all like recent, Hugh Jackman Wolverine performances. The character is always kind of down the dumps and is dealing with whatever tragedy and alcoholism and so many other issues in between. But I would have liked to have seen the actual thing that his character is constantly referencing to, is worried about, and doesn't really want to divulge or talk about with other people. We find out that this Wolverine has a pretty bad reputation, not just in his universe but across the multiverse, and as to why. And we're told as to why, but we're never shown as to why. And I would have liked to have seen that. I think it would have worked better for his character. Nothing wrong with his performance though, because it's great, but it was more just the way in which it was told to us. I think it could have been done better. Those negative things aside, the movie is really entertaining thanks to its humor, its action, surprise supporting characters who go above and beyond being just cameos, but especially because of Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman. If you're most excited to see Deadpool and Wolverine in Deadpool and Wolverine, then you're going to get what you want with this movie. The two of them together is a blast, and their dynamic, hatred, friendship, sexual tension, at least according to Deadpool, at least, it works across the board. It made me want to see them interact with each other more in this movie and maybe in the future, and perhaps they will in time. But, that's a review. That's a discussion for another day. Overall, Deadpool and Wolverine is a very good summer blockbuster with a handful of flaws. But thankfully, it succeeds thanks to its two title characters. Two title characters that I would love to see more of in the MCU again. And perhaps we will, thanks to certain announcements recently with Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars, 2 movies that are about to, come out pretty soon, the next couple of years, directed by the Russo brothers, also starring Robert Downey Jr. as Doctor Doom. We'll get to all that in just a bit. So don't you worry. Don't you worry. I have a lot of stuff to catch up on right now. But yeah, that's my overall thoughts on Deadpool Wolverine. A really fun summer blockbuster that just has, 2 great lead performances, thanks to Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman, who've, really made these characters their own. I mean, we're coming up on the 25th kind of anniversary that for Hugh Jackman playing this character. It's pretty special. But X-Men, came out 2000, nearly 25 years ago, 24 years ago, as of this specific year. And even though Ryan Reynolds had a rough start of it with X-Men Origins Wolverine, not his fault, 2016's Deadpool was absolutely incredible, and it proved that Ryan Reynolds was born to play this character, and I imagine he's going to keep playing the character for quite some time, along with Jackman, who I'm sure will stay on as Wolverine for a little bit. There's actually a great joke in regard to that, but yeah, overall, I really enjoyed this movie. I recommend it and also, you know what? One thing that surprised me, I forgot to bring this up during the, earlier on in the review, but it's like, yeah, they do make fun of the Fox era to a degree, the Fox era X-Men movies and Marvel movies. But at the same time, and I would say more often than not, they're actually surprisingly reverent of them and kind towards them. And they actually have like a nice goodbye to a lot of those films and those characters. Giving them the end that I feel like a lot of them deserve, which is something going in I didn't actually honestly expect. I thought it'd be mostly just Deadpool riffing on it and making fun of it, but no, actually, there is some humor directed towards it. Some of it, kind of cutting, but a lot of it, most of the time, I would say it's a really respectful and heartfelt goodbye to that era. And there's even there's an end credit stinger, of course. And it's not like setting up the next movie or anything like that. I won't get into details, but it's more of like a joke in the film itself, revolving around a certain moment that happens to a character. But they even play this kind of nice, montage, towards the end, recapping a lot of the, older Fox era X-Men films, starting with the original one, showing a lot of behind the scenes footage and archive footage and stuff, seeing these, a lot of these actors when they were 20 plus years younger. I mean, Jackman 25 years younger. So that was really nice. And so that surprised me. And I thought that was really kind of them to do. So if you happen to be a big fan of the Fox era Marvel films, not just the X movies, but some of those other ones as well, but you have a lot of affection towards them, and you had maybe a little bit concern of this movie's just gonna rip all those movies apart. Those are part of my childhood. They make fun of them to a degree, but not to the extent that I think you might think. If anything, they do a great job of saying thank you to those films and in that era. All the good ones and all the bad ones. And I thought that was honestly kind of sweet. So that was a really nice little surprise in Deadpool and Wolverine. But what about you guys? Were you surprised by Deadpool and Wolverine? Did you really love the movie? Were you more mixed on it? Did you not like it? Were you disappointed by it? As always, let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you guys next time.